Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and again we are continuing on with whatever I want to call this. I'm not quite sure what I want to call this yet, but in our last episode we were talking about the Seven Mountains Mandate and how it connected to Project 2025. At the end of it, the goals of Project 2025 have an alignment with something called Agenda 47. And I'd said, oh, wow, what is that? And we'll get onto it within our next episode. And this is that next episode. So probably Project 2025 Part 3, Agenda 47. That might be our title. But before I begin to listen to this episode or any other episode from This and That, go to talkingaboutthisandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. You will also find this on mc.substack.com. So what is Agenda 47? And again, I'm using Wikipedia as my source, and since its write-up is better than my own, I'm just going to pretty much cite it word for word. As of September 2024, the policies are detailed in 46 videos. This is Agenda 47. The first one uploaded on December 15, 2022. The last one on December 22nd, 2023. The videos are usually accompanied by a transcription and often by complementary material regarding the policy in question, as exemplified by the proposition Agenda 47, like rescuing America's auto industry from Joe Biden's disastrous job-killing policies, which contains links to reports and articles from entities such as the America First Policy Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and the Harris Poll. Could that be a relationship to Kamala? Gosh, I hope not, because this doesn't sound very flattering. So, Wikipedia gives us this rundown, point by point. Sit down and get ready, because this one is going to be long, and it might even get broken up into more than one part. So here we go. Take it away, Wikipedia. Regarding the economy, propositions relating to the economy include restrictions on Chinese ownership of infrastructure in the United States, including energy, technology, telecommunications, farmland, natural resources, medical supplies, and other strategic national assets, preventing all future Chinese purchases and forcing the Chinese to sell any current holding. Full stop. And the way that Trump is cozying up to Xi, you really think that's going to be happening? No, it sounds to me like they might be inviting more ownership. And if what I'm being told about the bond market, which is our bread and butter, that it's thinning and we're headed towards insolvency and possibly the loss of our sovereignty, well, all deals and bets might be out, because if you have done your research, China owns a whole lot of our treasury bonds. Oh boy, yeah. Anyway, this is meant to end, quote-unquote, Joe Biden's war on American energy and deregulating domestic production, getting out of the Paris Agreement, and issuing fast approvals to every oil infrastructure project presented to his administration, which is exactly, by the way, what he did. Do you remember these words? Drill, baby, drill. Well, all right, so we're not drilling on American soil. We're just skimming off the top of, we're not skimming off the top of. No, we're just taking the barrels wholesale from Venezuela and pocketing the money where? Some sort of account in Qatar that only POTUS, that is DJT POTUS, can touch? Wow. All right. The Biden war was on the coal and oil dependency of this nation and a shift towards cleaner, more renewable, and in the long run, cheaper energy. And there were projects nearly completed that POTUS Trump shut down. Then we went to war with Iran, and they bottlenecked the oil we depend on, a form called Brent crude, not the lighter oil we frack. No, we actually export this and cannot use it ourselves to save our now rock-bottom reserves. That's a piece of information you didn't want to hear. Next, universal baseline tariffs on most foreign products, which will increase incrementally if other countries manipulate their currency or, quote unquote, otherwise engage in unfair trading practices, and lowering taxes, revoking China's most favored nation's trade status, gradually stopping all Chinese imports of essential goods, stopping American companies from investing in China, and banning federal contracts for any company that outsources to China. Again, he's bowing to Xi Jinping. You really think that Trump is doing this now? It's probably going the other way. Those tariffs were paid by our importers in a bid to make us stop bringing in products from China. But it's not worked because admittedly China has a superiority in those markets, so we simply pay higher prices. Terrific. Next, decreasing trade deficit, especially with China. Decreasing trade deficit. Not bailing out failing banks, but, quote unquote, unleashing energy production, slashing regulations, and repealing, quote unquote, Biden's tax hikes to reduce inflation. Passing the, quote unquote, Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. If any country applies a certain percent tariff on American-made goods, the same tariff will be applied on theirs. The other countries, quote unquote, will have two choices. They'll get rid of their tariffs on us, or they will pay us hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will make an absolute fortune, unquote. This is meant to help agricultural states and manufacturers. The so-called presumption that the sender pays the tariffs is a fantasy. Raising tariffs only hurts our economy. But the idea is to get our sellers to stop buying altogether from China. Biden's chip program would have done so over time anyway. But Trump shut the door on that one too. As to the farmers, the soy industry has tanked. Now that Iran has been brought into the mix, fertilizer prices are going through the roof. Does anybody still want to own a farm in America? Really? I think it's like God save our farms because we might start starving. Wow. To quote-unquote save America's auto industry from Joe Biden's radical Green New Deal policies, unquote, by terminating all of Biden's policies regarding emission regulations, fossil fuels, and electric vehicles, especially the, quote-unquote, mandates designed to force Americans into expensive electric cars, subsidies for, quote-unquote, electric cars for rich people, and, quote-unquote, doubled CAFE standards, also asking Canada and Mexico for full compliance with the terms of USMCA regarding the amount of regional auto parts content in North American cars, which reduction benefited China and other countries, ending delays in federal drilling permits and leases, and restoring the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. He promised, quote-unquote, higher wages for auto workers. Tariffs were a policy in Trump's first term centered on China and later extended to the European Union, Canada, and Mexico. They led to retaliatory tariffs imposed by the affected countries and to a trade war with China, which, quote-unquote, raised the price for items such as baseball hats, luggage, bicycles, TVs, sneakers, and a variety of materials used by American manufacturers, unquote. They also caused loss of jobs and hurt manufacturers and farmers. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said, quote-unquote, those tariffs on Chinese goods have, quote-unquote, imposed more harm on consumers and businesses, unquote, than on China, unquote. There has to be a better way to do automotive than electric because the grid is still powered by pollutants. But then again, now we have more data centers vying for the grid power. The Biden-era green policies would have taken years to occur and had to be carried out over several presidencies. But who is to say that the outcome might not have been better for the planet? Now, USMCA, United States Mexico Canada Accord agreement. It's a trade agreement, which means basically we're doing kind of a free, tariff-free. It's a reciprocal thing between Canada and America and Mexico and America. And we're buddying back and forth in our trade. It's a trade agreement, people. It was a good one. Wow. Well, so much for that. Trump's new economic proposals drew criticism from 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists. Trump's campaign and supporters rebuked the laureate's critiques. Wharton School, Trump's alma mater, Goldman Sachs and Moody Analytics, amongst others. Okay, the Wharton School of Business, they're part of the problem. And they were critiquing this? Yeah, you bet, because they knew it was coming. Goldman Sachs, the diamond capital of the world? Wow, come on. People with brains could see this was a bad idea. After his electoral victory, Trump enacted a series of steep tariffs affecting nearly all goods imported into the United States. Next, propositions relating to education include. By the way, this is economics. Think about your 7 mountains mandate. That was the one for business. This is the one for education. Cutting federal funding for any school or program teaching critical race theory or, quote-unquote, gender ideology. Directing the Departments of Justice and Education to open civil rights investigations into any school district that has engaged in race-based discrimination. Also, quote-unquote, removing the radicals who have infiltrated the Federal Department of Education. And, quote-unquote, keeping men out of women's sports. Creating a new way to certify teachers based on their patriotism, giving preferential funding and treatment to states and school districts that abolish teacher tenure for grades K through 12 and adopt merit pay, cutting the number of school administrators, specifically the ones in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and adopting direct election of school principals by the parents, quote-unquote, reclaiming our once great educational institutions from the radical left, quote-unquote, by using the college accreditation system, firing the, quote-unquote, radical left accreditators, and substituting them with new ones, quote-unquote, who will impose real standards on colleges. The standards will include, quote-unquote, defending the American tradition and Western civilization, end quote, protecting free speech, eliminating, quote-unquote, wasteful administrative positions, specifically all the ones dealing with DEI, offering accelerated and low-cost degrees, providing job placement and career services, and implementing college entrance and exit exams to prove learning quality. Also directing the Department of Justice to pursue federal civil rights cases against schools that, quote-unquote, engage in racial discrimination. The ones that persist in, quote-unquote, discrimination under the guise of equity will have their endowment taxed, and through budget reconciliation, quote-unquote, I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment. Full stop. Budget reconciliation is something Republicans do very well. No Democrat votes needed here. We just do it our way. We just gonna do the do. Part of the seized funds will be used as restoration, quote-unquote, for victims of these illegal and unjust policies. According to The Nation, quote-unquote, many experts in higher education have begun to sound the alarm that such actions may infringe on academic freedom and institutional autonomy, two cornerstones of American higher education, unquote. Whereas Trump's national press secretary, who, by the way, is leaving, I have a kid, I want to devote more time to my kid, and quietly, I just can't keep justifying saying this in front of my kid, whatever it is I'm saying. Whereas Trump's National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated, quote, by increasing access to school choice, empowering parents to have a voice in their child's education, and supporting good teachers, President Trump will improve academic excellence for all students, unquote. Hogs, my wash. Are you kidding? Let's go back and look at this nonsense again. Radical left. Anything that isn't Christian, Christocentric. It's a Jesus world now, y'all. Yeah? Click, click, click. We armed, locked, and loaded. We gonna blow y'all's head off if y'all don't heave over to our program. Wait, do I hear sirens? We can't do that. Dang it. Well, okay, so there's that. And then there is entrance and exit exams. Do you know your SAT words, my dear seniors in high school? You better study your SAT words. Your SAT, ACT, college entrance. Do you know what the college exit exams are called? Finals. You have to qualify for that there degree that your tuition is paying for. They don't necessarily have to confer that degree and say, you've graduated. They can say, you're flunked. Boy, did you waste your money. Money. That's the incentive to try and get the best out of your education in college. For that narding piece of paper that says, I did it. I have a bachelor's degree and a heck of a lot of debt. Right. Everything else is, well, who are some of the people that came in on this? The Heritage Foundation. What? Wow. Like I said, they want a standard, a Christian standard. This is exactly where the Seven Mountains mandate to seize education comes in. Notice the language. Quote unquote, the standards will include defending the American tradition and Western civilization, protecting freedom of speech, eliminating wasteful administrative positions, specifically all the ones dealing with DEI, offering accelerated and low-cost degrees, providing job placement and career services, and implementing college entrance and exit plans to prove learning quality, unquote. Okay, job placement would be a nice touch, colleges, especially those degrees that go into the job market. Yeah! Students, have you earned that hand up, leg up, something up? Entrance into the job market? Did you actually pass the test? Are your GPAs high enough to actually say, hey, Dean's List? Mine were grin. I did Dean's List 2 years running for my bachelor's to part of my 4-year degree. I had done my associate, so I only had to go for my bachelor's, and I did Dean's List for both of them. My bachelor's, biblical studies. Tell me, what is a job for that? Oh, a pastor? Oh, but see, that's what they want to do, get you into the church, their churches. Sorry, Charlie, not all churches are going to qualify for that one. Well, like I said, entrance and exit exams, they're already there. And we're already offering accelerated and low-cost degrees. Go listen to the ads. A 4-year degree for under $10,000. There is a college that does this, and they specialize in business and or tech, or they specialize in those things. And they bring real-life experience into the mix. Here's the problem, folks. When you enter into the 4-year degree, you have to have X amount of credit hours. Each credit costs X amount of dollars. See the scam here? See the business side model? Your credits are so many dollars per credit, and you have to have X amount of credit per class and X amount of credits overall for your associate's half of your 4-year, and then your baccalaureate half of your 4-year. It's in 2 parts. At year 2, you get your associate's program complete. But if you're continuing on for your bachelor's, it just kind of flows forward. Oh, and your price per credit ticks up slightly. That's how you know you've got your associate side. You're now doing your bachelor's side. Money, money, money. Pay me money, 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 money for your degree. Yeah, it's like that. So, once you have completed all the credits, satisfactorily passing all the classes, guess what we give you? A degree. That's the proof that you learned. Most colleges probably won't give you job placement. They'll say, take your degree and go get a job. So under Biden, this was already going on, folks. This has been going on for years. But they were not teaching Jesus, y'all. Right. That's the idea. So then, specifically this, the quote-unquote defending American tradition and Western civilization, quote-unquote. That is a debatable history here. What they want is their version of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male-dominant theoretical ideology indoctrinated on the children from K through 12. You may as well be waving red banners of communism, but these will be the banners of a theocracy or ecclesiocracy. Let me say that word again. Ecclesiocracy. A theocracy is what we had in the Old Testament Israel under Moses. God ran the nation. An ecclesiocracy would have been the Holy Roman Catholic Church back in her heyday, who was the kingmaker or breaker and would ride across hither and yon and do war to establish the Catholic way. Today, the Pope just makes a lot of noise and runs Catholicism as a religion. However, we do have another example of an ecclesiocracy. Islam. Islam is an ecclesiocracy / theocracy. They take their thing directly to Allah, whom they say is Akbar. I'm not so sure, but then I'm not a Muslim. I don't know this Allah, so I'll leave it at that. Muslim listeners, please don't be offended. I'm telling the truth. I'm not a Muslim. I've not had a relationship with your Allah, so I'm not sure who he is and whether or not he is benevolently good or not. There we go. This is a church state. A theocracy is a God state. God is ruling the state directly. Think about it this way. New heavens and new earth, or the 1,000-year reign. Theocracy. God is directly ruling the earth. All the governments, they belong to him now. Theocracy, everybody has to live under it, deal with it, and just deal with it. An ecclesiocracy is when religion is running the state. That is sort of what you're getting with Islam. Sharia law, anybody? Right. So, remember the drivers and the ideologies involved in all this. This is taking the Heritage Foundation and making it policy. Quote, 10 principles for achieving great schools that lead to great jobs, unquote, by ensuring that instead of, quote, indoctrinating young people with inappropriate racial, sexual, and political material, unquote, schools must refocus on preparing, quote, unquote, children to succeed in the world of work, unquote. Wait a minute. That's not only not Christian, that is communism, people. Let me read this again without the quote. 10 principles for achieving great schools that lead to great jobs, ensuring that instead of indoctrinating young people with the inappropriate racial, sexual, and political material, everything that isn't communism. If I were sitting here as Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, it would be the same, absolutely the same. Inappropriate racial, inappropriate sexual, and absolutely inappropriate religio-political content. Remember, in communism, religion is the opiate of the masses, said Marx. Okay. Schools must refocus on preparing children to succeed in the world of work, where the government tells you what your job is. That's the only catch you don't see here. We're still capitalist, free market enterprise. So it's catch a job, any job, get a job, just get a job. Pay your taxes, you peon, while we the rich dodge them. Wow. See how communist that is? The only thing is that the state is not dictating what those jobs are. It's a different kind of indoctrination. Oh. Yeah, no, instead of indoctrinating the people with the inappropriate stuff, we'll be indoctrinating them with what we deem to be appropriate stuff. Right. Get them while they're young. The principles are, quote unquote, restoring parental rights, specifically to control the education of their children. This includes being made aware of academic standards, updating on acts of violence, inspecting, quote unquote, professional development materials, being notified about guest speakers, reviewing the school's budget, knowing about bullying, health, and mental health concerns, quote unquote, to have the right to opt out of school health care services and be immediately notified if any school employee, quote unquote, has worked to change their children's name, pronouns, or understanding of his or her gender, unquote. Wait, all right, one of the big deals is damn homosexuality, LGBTQIA, men's walking down streets holding hands. I mean, the black people's was bad enough. This is a whole new war game. They may as well be Marines and go, hoorah! My. Now, if we looked at that again, we've already got rules for this, and we have a device for it, too. To the extent that the parents actually give a rip about their kids' education, they can join the Parent Teachers Association, and that will tell them who's teaching their children things, what's going on in the schools, and if there are health and mental health concerns in the school. COVID, anybody? They'll even be told about guest speakers, etc., etc. But this is presuming this is K through 12. Now, this is also in the colleges as well, because in the classroom K through 12, you really don't have a lot of guest speakers unless it is Daddy and Mommy go to the school and talk about what they do. Wow. Of course, if Daddy and Mommy are LGBTQ, awkward! So, a right to opt out of school health care services. Now that, folks, is anti-vax Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Sr.'s rolling in his grave on this one. Yeah, let's do things differently now, folks. Let's destroy the health of America, which is kind of stinking to begin with, but we're just going to make it worse. I hear polio is back. Hello, iron lung. How many kids are going to die from that scourge now? Summer's here, polio's back. Oh, wow. Why? Well, because vaccinations cause autism. Haven't you heard? Now, if I come off sounding like the two-bit backwater Appalachian hick hillbilly, to those that actually have this accent and are rather educated, my apologies. This is usually the meme of the indigent, ignorant, illiterate, idiotic that believes all the propaganda, right? So, all right, quote-unquote, great principals and great teachers, i.e., empowering parents and local school boards to hire and fire principals and teachers. Let me say something here, folks. Tenure. Tenure hasn't been around for a long time. I'm going to kind of out my mother here. My mother, when she took up teaching as an English as second language, an ESL teacher, made X. She was in the United Teachers of Dade Union, Teachers Union. After 10 years on the job, she received something called tenure. Tenure is 10-year. It's just pronounced differently. She's now less fireable. You're kind of on the chopping block in your first 10 years of work. But with tenure comes pension. Now a portion of every paycheck goes into the pension pot for her retirement. Smart lady, my mother, towards the end of her teaching career, when she knew her mandatory retirement was coming up, she went to Barry University took 2 years more college, and went from a bachelor's in elementary school education with ESOL to a master's in elementary school education with ESOL. That meant her pay went up because she had tenure. That also meant her retirement pension ticked up. I care for my mother, and she still gets her pension at the age of 88. Let's just put it this way, between that and her Social Security, I don't have a financial problem unless I have a whopping big bill that's going to eat up both in a given calendar month and make it so I can't pay any bills. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. She's had this kind of money for long enough that she has a reserve of some sort of savings, so I guess I'll get by. In other words, this is a social safety net, folks, for a teacher. Pension is a very big deal. Since we started getting rid of it, Social Security has been having to be increased. One of the reasons why Social Security didn't have to be so big for everybody was because a lot of companies and industries and institutions did pensions. Right. And where needs be, federal government backed them. That was the point. You paid in and then you were paid out. Hers is apparently possibly a pension for life, and I pray that it continues to be that way because that allows her to do a lot of saving. Savings is a good thing. I like it. But if you can hire and fire because you don't have tenure, you don't have pension, what makes you think those teachers are going to give a rip about the work they do? There's no job security in it. There's no future in it. There's no retirement in it. Money, money, money. Incentive, pay me money, money, money with pension, and I'll put out more. Okay, fine. It continues, quote unquote, knowledge and skills, not CRT and gender indoctrination, i.e., teaching, reading, writing, math, science, arithmetic, and other truly useful subjects. This includes getting, quote unquote, the left's equity agenda out of our classrooms. Full stop again. Are you kidding? Reading, writing, and arithmetic taught to the tune of a hickory stick. Those are lyrics about K through 12 education. Well, all right, not taught to the tune of a hickory stick or a ruler across the knuckles. That's old school. New school is No Child Left Behind. Pass them anyway. Oh, and then we just dumb down America. But reading, writing, arithmetic, math, science, history, and other truly useful subjects. History's not going to be one of them because we're trying to rewrite ours and teach it to our children. The Smithsonian Institute has been asked to remove all of its slavery content because we whites never called blacks. Tigger. Right. So, okay. Love of country, quote unquote. This includes reinstating the 1776 Commission. The 1776 Commission was a short-lived advisory committee established by U.S. President Donald Trump in September 2020 to promote, quote unquote, patriotic education and counter progressive revisions of American history. This right now is being attempted in the museums to shut out the slavery issues of our past so as to make white America popular and reinstate slavery. For if we forget about that past, we don't see the harm. Teaching the happy things and not the hard things of our history, which becomes bias and is replaced by theology. Quote unquote, freedom to pray, i.e., quote unquote, we will support bringing back prayer to our school. Full stop again. I'm not against that. I'm also not against explanation of the Ten Commandments because, the you shall not kill, you shall not covet, you shall not have sex with your neighbor's wife, you shall not lie under oath, you shall not those things. And honoring your parents, which means as kids, if your parents aren't trying to tell you how to commit crimes, do what you're told. But as kids, respect their opinions and care for them as best you can when they're to the point where they can't care for themselves. Oh, no, we're going to take them to the euthanization chambers. 65 and you don't go on Medicare anymore. It's off to the chambers, Mom. Bye! Sorry, Dad. Love you. Get kind. Beep. You wait. That's coming. Elders, I salute you. I'm 64. I could be going to the chambers in November, if there are any, and they start killing us off. My mother will have preceded me because she's 88. Well, okay. This becomes the point of indoctrination as to how the prayers are made, and then it becomes, as in Texas, Bible studied in the classroom. And this becomes the indoctrination of how the groups backing this, as in white evangelical Christendom, teaches Scripture. In other words, how do you read your Bible? What are your lenses that you're reading it through? You're reading, everybody reads into it. Very few seek to read out of it and have it speak for itself. What I would support is the freedom to be able to pray. If Jimmy and Johnny and Janie and June want to bow their heads and pray and say, Jesus, bless us and bless this person and that, the long list how kids pray, bless, and God bless Sissy, and God bless Daddy, and God bless teacher, and God help teacher so-and-so because they're not very nice. Yeah, I mean, it's that sort of thing. If they want to do that, if as they're older they want to gather around the flagpole or just gather in a circle to pray for peace in their school, to pray for the souls of their classmates, what? Freedom of religion allows that already. Problem is that a lot of people have been so offended by it that leftistly or secularly that's been discouraged out of the campuses. Oh, but you have your club, Bible club, and you have campus crusades. So you already have this stuff going on. Thing is, he wants to make this an indoctrination to be an ecclesiocracy. See? Church, specifically the evangelical church, will run the nation. Does this bother you people who are not Christian, want nothing to do with Christ, and just what? Does this really bother you, LGBTQ? It really should, because your heads are on the chopping block. These people don't like you. Doesn't matter what the scriptures say. They already just don't like you because you're different. All right, moving on. Quote-unquote, safe, secure, and drug-free by, quote-unquote, immediate expulsion for any student who harms a teacher or another student. Wait, what? We already have those initiatives. It's called the school police officer, the hall monitors, the school security officers. Yeah, the principal's office. And you can be expelled and removed from the school environment if you're going to be that big a troublemaker. Suspension and expulsion. That's what they have. Suspension and expulsion. And if you're a senior trying to get into college, the last thing you need is either. So we already have this. Safe, secure, and drug-free. We've already got metal detectors and clear plastic backpacks. Or at least we did for a while, especially after 9/11. This includes sending the quote-unquote out-of-control troublemakers out of the classroom and into reform schools and corrections facilities, supporting quote-unquote school districts that allow highly trained teachers to carry concealed weapons at school, and supporting federal funding to hire trained gun owners as armed guards. Also directing the quote-unquote U.S. Food and Drug Administration to convene an independent outside panel to investigate whether transgender hormone treatments and ideology increase the risk of extreme depression, aggression, and violence. He will also look at whether common psychiatric drugs as well as genetically engineered cannabis and other narcotics are causing psychotic breaks. Additionally, immediate suspension or expulsion for illegal drug use or possession in the school. Okay, full stop. Suspension and expulsion? Yeah, if I'd ever gotten caught in the lunch break where we did this on the campus smoking weed, I would have been suspended. Then my father would have beaten me to death. I wouldn't be sitting here doing a broadcast now. I'd be dead. My husband wouldn't have been married, and my mother would have nobody to take care of her because her husband would have killed her daughter a long time ago. But the school would have blabbed. Well, we're sending her home because she was caught with reefer. Dang it. That's already instituted. It's already there. Now, genetically engineered cannabis? Stop right there. There's been a grand debate about federalizing and bringing cannabis out of its restriction right now. He did an executive order, but it doesn't mean that it's been a law. So I don't think it's moved from where it is to where it is to where he wanted it to go, because I don't think it was ever actually put into law. So I think cannabis is sitting on the it's useless list, which is stupid because it might not be so useless. But genetically engineered cannabis? What do they mean by that? Because let me tell you something. A properly run program, like what medical cannabis is doing right now here in Florida, means that they know what was done from the ground, the dirt, the seed, to the plant, to the usable part, to how they were blended. Heck, they give you a percentage of THC to CBD ratio on everything that you buy. And it has a barcode, and it has one of those scan codes, the scanner thing, that if you click on it, it'll send you to a website that will show you all the stats on that item, on that batch. Talk about quality control. The thing that I have a problem with is what's known as street cannabis. You don't know what's in it. You don't know what's genetically modified. How about additives, like maybe a little space dust? LSD, anybody? PCP, maybe? Just a smidge. I believe I can fly. Oh, wait, he jumped off the roof. Ooh, splat. What was he on? Oh, all of a sudden a lot of doobies are being flushed down the school toilets, and kids are going, damn, I could have smoked that. I'd be dead. And they're going to do a lynching on the seller because we don't know what we put into that stuff, but we're not happy. We paid good money, and now we're destroying it because we're too afraid to smoke it. That, to me, is a problem. Other narcotics. Well, I don't know that it's the transgender hormonal treatments other than testosterone, roid rage, etc. But see, then again, this is that y'all turning these people into hama. My daughter would have many, many words to say about this. She deals with kids that are on drugs, like Ritalin for being wildly ADHD. Right. Suffice it to say, we already have movements towards this, and they're being subverted by the homophobic activities of the above program. Moving on, quote-unquote, universal school choice. This includes, quote-unquote, that parents can send their children to the public, private, or religious school that best suits them, unquote. Quote-unquote, project-based learning to help train the students for meaningful work outside the classroom, quote-unquote. All right, all the above sounds laudable, but what do parents really know about education? No, what they want is to exert the church doctrine within the governmentally controlled K-12 system. Some of this, like tightening up school security, is a good thing, but these were doubtless already in effect. The biggest war here is on the LGBTQ community and their desire to be recognized. But project-based learning to teach kids for meaningful work outside the classroom. How many others, what do you truly need to have for project-based learning? This takes K through 12, which is supposed to produce a critical thinking, rounded adult with literacy skills, etc., and tailors them for job placement. Again, this smacks of communism, people, and we want to scream at the socialists and go, they're going to bring communism in. We already have it according to this. It's just the church-run communism. When the government gets its fat little fingers into everything, that is a form of totalitarianistic communism. Government owns all and then tells you what you can have, where to live, what to wear, how to comport yourself, and what job you're allowed. Good Lord. Quote-unquote internships and work experiences for all students. Wait a minute. Stop. Internships, we already have that. Work experience. You can pay under $10,000 for a 4-year degree. I think that the school is Kaiser University? No, I'm sorry. It's under $11K. Under $11K for a master's at Kaiser University. I think that's the ad. Do you know how they pull that off? Work experience. You already have a job. Your master's degree is so that you can get up in the corporation. So you need to have a higher degree. We can work with that. For under 11K, you can take your bachelor's and make it a master's. Under 11K for a 2-year degree, by the way. 2 years for a master's degree. You do have to have the credits. However, how do you produce those credits? You pay for the educational time because you're paying for the school use, the program's use, and the teachers, whether this is remote or whether this is something else. All right. So this is bunk. This includes implementing quote unquote funding preferences for schools that actively work to help students secure internships, part-time job or part-time work, and summer jobs. Quote-unquote jobs and career counseling provided by all schools. Also, closing the Department of Education and sending all education matters back to the states. There's your indoctrination to an ecclesiocracy. There it is. Some states are going to go ecclesiocracy. Some states are not. Some states can't handle an education overload. And the education will simply fall apart in those states. And it's like, oh, well, that's the way it goes. This begins a cycle of indoctrination, as the ideal is to have a one-party state, Republican MAGA only. Then we begin to tamper with the Constitution or discard it altogether. This idea is right in line with the Seven Mountains Mandate, but this again is not taking the nation for Jesus, but for their idea of Jesus' kingdom. Those jobs will only be for the quote-unquote chosen. The quote-unquote blue states are currently to not get any real government funding as the push to eliminate the Democratic Party altogether continues. To punish blue states who are now seen to be quote-unquote enemies of the state. This is what's going on. Supporting homeschooling by allowing homeschool parents to use 529 educational savings accounts to spend up to $10,000 per child tax-free. Also, ensuring that every homeschooling family is, quote-unquote, entitled to full access to the benefits available to non-homeschooled parents, including participating in athletic programs, clubs, and after-school activities, educational trips, and more. Wait. If you're not in the system, why are you participating in the system? I thought the whole point of being homeschooled was to not partake in the DEI, it's so leftist, bad, nasty public school system. But you want the perks and the benefits, but you don't want their education? Oh my, that's called having your cake and eating it too. Endowing the American Academy with funds collected by, quote, taxing the large endowments of private universities plagued by anti-Semitism, unquote. Don't forget, Israel, Israel, oh how we love thee, implicitly referring to the 2024 pro-Palestinian protests on university campuses. The American Academy's mission will be to make, quote-unquote, a truly world-class education available to every American free of charge, and to do it without adding a single dime to the federal debt, unquote, covering all subjects and trades online for free. Also, quote-unquote, using study groups, mentors, industry partnerships, and the latest breakthrough in computing, unquote. According to the Trump campaign, the Academy will be strictly apolitical. It will compete directly with the university system by granting degree credentials recognized by the government and federal contractors. It will award the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, and it will allow people to complete an unfinished college education. However, the push to eradicate ideologies that are deemed, quote-unquote, un-American or un-Christian is the key to who gets what. This is very much in line with a quote-unquote beast regime. So for the quote-unquote chosen, the education is free, but it's not education. Due to the use of AI, it would be quote-unquote party indoctrination. AI will be running everything else, and this is the Thiel model of thought. Peter Thiel, the techno-state. AI runs it, you just die. Sucks to be you, hominid. You don't think so? Peter, Thiel. Go look him up on Google. Go find out about him. He's really interesting. And he talks a lot about the Antichrist, preaches about it. Interesting guy. According to Political, quote unquote, using the federal government to create an entirely new educational institution aimed at competing with the thousands of existing schools would drastically reshape American higher education, unquote, adding that this policy would likely need U.S. congressional approval and that it targets the over, quote unquote, 40 million Americans who have some college but never completed their degree, unquote. Similarly to some of the student debt relief efforts by the Biden administration, but differing in the source of its financing. And this is where we're going to stop because, like I said, this is going to get long. Let me just give you a preview. Propositions relating to the expansion of presidential powers, foreign affairs, healthcare and social security, immigration reform, infrastructure and urban planning, journalism, information and censorship, law enforcement, national security, social issues. See, that's the Agenda 47. It's like there's sort of 47 of them, or I don't know. It's a lot. And so we will be continuing on this in our next episode. So until then,